Welcome back to my channel. Today we have 8 terrifying skinwalker stories. So sit back and enjoy. Number 1. Renaud Lucy is watching me. My grandmother on my mother's side has always been very superstitious. For lack of better word, she's not religious, but she does believe in a lot of paranormal stuff. Her mother was full-blooded Navajo, and her father was Irish. Either way, she had never been anywhere east of Montana, and she grew up in Nevada. One year, when I was in grade school, we went to visit her. Most of the visit was pretty uneventful. Typical boring old people stuff. Except she always kept her curtains drawn shut and would always peek out the window, and when someone asked what she was doing, she would simply reply, "Renaud Lucy is watching me." This went on for nearly the entire visit, until a few days before we were due to leave. My grandma and my then baby brother, he's 19 now, were in the front yard that evening, planting flowers, when all of a sudden my grandmother starts shouting, telling my little brother, "Get away from that creature. It's not safe." Of course, being in Nevada, we all assumed that my brother had found a scorpion or a rattlesnake. So we all ran outside to see my grandmother clutching my little brother and shaking in terror against the side of the house. Standing out in the yard was a large, black, Great Dane-sized dog. It was staring at my grandmother with an intensity I had never seen before. It looked up at us, gave a little huff, and bounded off. I don't remember if it moved unusually fast or not, but do remember it had really deep yellow eyes. When my mother asked my grandmother what had happened, she kept repeating, "The Renaud Lucy has found me." She moved a couple weeks after that. Number 2. On the res alone at night. My uncle and cousin saw a large deer on the side of the road. When they got closer, it hopped over the fence like a bipedal man. One time driving back from Gallup, my dad saw an old Navajo woman walking on the side of the road, and when he slowed down to offer her a ride, she took off into the plains quickly with inhuman speed. Once when I was a kid, my family was at my aunt's house, which is in a rural, secluded area, when we were towed with by a few entities. They would make animal noises, and when we looked to the direction from which the noises were coming from, they would turn a flashlight on and off. The noises would come from all directions. Usually, when I'm there on the reservation, visiting alone late at night, I will feel the presence of evil and dread. Panic and paranoia will wash over me, and as sudden as it comes, it will leave. Number 3. It moved like a toy rocking horse. My uncle is Mexican and Native American. This happened in the Mojave Desert in Southern California. He was driving around with his girlfriend late at night, and they saw something that looked like a huge black dog on the side of the road. He slowed down, and the dog began crossing the road. Instead of walking like a normal dog would, this thing moved like a toy rocking horse. He said it stopped in the middle of the road and stared right at them, and its eyes had a red glow. My uncle is the most badass person I know, and it scared the crap out of him. Number 4. They ran away on their back legs. So this happened about 12 years ago. My family owns a farm in the heart of an Indian reservation. One winter, I was home for Christmas, taking care of the farm while my parents were away Christmas shopping. As I was home by myself, way late in the night, and I hear all our cows freaking out. I knew it had to be the wild dogs that are rampant in the area. So I threw on some boots, grab a shotgun, load it up, and head out to the field. This was a perfect scenario for a horror movie. It was cloudy, but there was a full moon, and it was breaking through the clouds, just right to light up all the snow. I ran out into the middle of the field, and just in time, I see 2 dogs. They were standing up facing each other and fighting. I think perfect 2 for 1. So I pump a shell into the chamber of Mr. 12 Gog, and then it happened. The 2 dogs heard the rack. They both stopped, looked over at me, and ran away on their back legs. I froze, and every ghost story about skinwalkers and all the other native legends I grew up with flew through my mind. Keep in mind, I'm a white guy, and up until then, these were all just boogeyman stories the native kids like to tell to scare us. That night, they became real to me. Number 5. It was neither fully human nor fully animal. In July 2004, near Gallup, New Mexico, I had my first and only encounter with a skinwalker. Before this, I used to say, I will believe it when I see it. Well, I'm a believer now. What I saw was not full human nor full animal. I was moving and had just completed the cleaning and was with my 10-year-old son. We had called it a night, and we were headed to our new place. As we walked out the front door, I saw a figure move from behind my neighbor's car to a nearby tree that stood between our apartments. It didn't have red glowing eyes, snarling teeth, or a rotten smell. It did move quickly, but not quick enough to avoid the light from a nearby light post and the porch lights. It didn't look at me or come toward me. It moved as if trying to avoid being seen. I was within 15 feet of it, but I did not look back to fully inspect it. What I saw was a wolf-like animal that sort of resembled the beast in Beauty and the Beast, just not cartoonish. It had brown fur that completely covered it. It wasn't a pelt. It was a very large wolf. It didn't have any human traits except that it walked on its hind legs. It cowered behind the tree as we got into our vehicle. When we got in, I asked my son, "Did you see that?" Thankfully, he hadn't. My brother-in-law insists that it wasn't a skinwalker because I would have never seen it. To this day, I can picture what it looked like, know they exist, and pray I never encounter one again. Number 6. The Grove. This didn't happen to me, but a very close friend of mine. I have heard a lot about coyotes and skinwalkers, and had a weird experience or two with coyotes. Creepiest was waking up to my sleeping bag being surrounded in paw prints, without ever hearing them during the night, but never anything paranormal, so to speak. Patrick's story, however, kept me from going back to a favorite backstory secret stash. He was leaving the area one morning, had been camping there a couple days, and said there was a coyote that always seemed to be close by. He loaded up his truck and started to drive down the washout to the fire road. At the end of the wash, he could see the coyote following him. When he pulled onto the road, it was running next to him. Now he was freaked out, so he sped up. He said he was going 35 or so, and it was running along beside him. That's not possible. When he looked back, the coyote was running on 2 legs and was wearing what Patrick said looked like buckskin pants. An instant later, it was a person wearing a coyote fur, keeping pace with his truck. When he looked again, it was gone. We never went back to the grove after that. Number 7. It had a dog's body, but with human hands and feet. I was spending a month with my cousins at my grandma's house. It was August, and my cousins' ages ranged from 10 to 15, and I was the oldest, being 15. I was staying with a 10, 13, and 14-year-old. We stayed up telling scary stories often. But one night, a few weeks in, we decided to make a campfire out back. My grandma's house is in a rural suburb. The neighbors aren't too far when you're driving down the road to her house, but in the backyard it's thick forest with man-made paths through it. Each house is on a hill, so only part of the basement was actually underground. That isn't important until later though. So we are towards the east side of our yard, in a smallish patch of open land. You couldn't see the neighboring yachts from there, and there was probably 3/4 a mile to each side of us that belonged to my grandma. It was maybe 11 at night, and we were playing Truth or Dare after telling scary stories. And my 14-year-old cousin dared me and the 13-year-old to go walk through the paths for 10 minutes or so. I said yes right away, as I wasn't easily scared and rather level-headed. But my younger cousin was a bit more hesitant. We didn't bring a flashlight because it wasn't pitch dark yet, and we could see enough to not die. We were walking through the paths for about 5 minutes, and could barely see the fire through the trees when we decided to turn. In the middle of the path was a large, dog-like creature, hunched over with its front hands an inch from the ground. What I remember most was how its eyes were so bright white, and it was humanoid dog-shaped with a human-like head but a dog-like body, but human hands and feet. It looked right at us, and I know I was paralyzed with fear as it dashed away the opposite way from us, towards a creek that ran through the yard. Eventually, my cousin and I screamed bloody effing murder, and the other cousins, my grandma, ran to us. And I don't remember much here because I was really disoriented and I couldn't think properly. But I did wake up in bed, so I assume that I was brought up to the house. All the kids slept in the basement, in a big room with sliding glass doors to the outside, as the room was on the side that wasn't underground. My bed was pressed against a big glass window, and I could see my cousins playing outside down below. The house is in Michigan, so it gets slightly chilly even in the end of August. And there was a slight breeze, so I put on a jacket and ran to join them outside, skipping breakfast, not wanting to miss out on anything fun. When I got down, I could tell they weren't playing, but rather running to get my grandma. Her dogs, both of them, were dead, ripped up. That night, we went to bed early. I woke up at maybe 2 a.m. because I felt something hit my head. My cousins were all sitting on the double bed opposite me on the other side of the room. There was a bunk bed and 2 double beds. The double beds for me and my 14-year-old cousin. They were being quiet and staring at me. The 13-year-old nodded his head toward the window. I froze. They all looked scared. I turned my head slightly to the side, and I saw a really messed up looking face pressed to the window with gaping eyes, looking down at me. I screamed so loud, and it bolted. My grandma called the police after I told her what happened, and they found nothing. I went home after that, and I have never been there during the night again. Number 8. It was like we knew what it really was. I decided to join my bestie Karen for a 3-day stay at her grandmother's place on the res. Her grandma lives near a place called Tuba City, Arizona, in the middle of nowhere but surrounded by rural homes. We go to college together, and I was kinda interested to know about Navajo tradition. The first day we stayed, it was pretty chill, nothing out of the ordinary, but then her grandma, not that old, around 67, said that a stray dog came out of nowhere and wouldn't leave. To me, it did act kinda strange and ugly looking. Black, shaggy coat, looked like a mix between a German Shepherd and a lab. That night, we were watching a movie in the living room. Had big windows that looked out into the front where the cars are parked. Nothing fancy, with the curtains wide open. Grandma was in the kitchen cooking dinner, and we were watching a movie. Next to the window is a medium bookshelf and where DVDs are kept. Karen went to put back a DVD he had just watched, but she freaked out because that stray black dog was staring at us through the window, standing on top of the wood box outside. Not something normal dogs do from my point of view or hers. Usually, my dog, which is a house dog, scratches the door to be let in. Rest dogs aren't house dogs, and dogs inside houses are frowned upon in Navajo tradition, meant to protect the house and owner. The other dogs seemed to stay awake from it. Karen opened the door and yelled at it to get off from the box. It ran off behind the shed. We went to the Tuba city to get some groceries, came back to the house. The dog was nowhere to be seen, nothing unusual. Grandma went to visit some people, so it was just Karen and I. About 5 o'clock, we heard someone trying to open the door. Both of us looked out since there had never been no car heard and no dogs barking. Looking out the living room window to the door, and there was the dog trying to open the door with its paws. 2 paws wrapped around the brass door knob, standing on its hind legs. I thought that was weird, but wasn't really freaked out. Karen was. She opened the door and chased it off. Grandma came back later, and Karen told her. Grandma didn't like what she heard. Got ready to sleep. We slept in the spare room, since it had 2 beds. One window with curtains opened a little. We turned off the light, but there was a sound coming from on top of the roof. Pitter-patter footsteps, and scratching sounds and panting. It then sounded like it jumped off onto the large plastic water barrel they had. At first we heard what sounded like barking, but as it grew louder, the other dogs seemed to be barking at something also. But all of a sudden, something was running around the house barking, and it was no dog. Nope, it wasn't. This barking sounded human. A deep male voice barking, like it knew that we knew it wasn't a dog. Exactly like that. Then panting again by the window, and we started freaking out. Karen decided, in my opinion, was stupid. Opened the curtains to look out. There was a stray dog on its hind legs, looking into our bedroom this time. But this time, it stunk, and what I thought were 2 black holes in the neck. Another pair of eyes twinkled. Think of those ugly, glossy spider eyes staring at you. And the paws were deformed, looking hands with overgrown, somewhat thick and sharp fingernails. Again, both screaming and shutting the curtains closed. Grandma came running through the door and seeing it. First thing she did was grab ashes from the fireplace, load 3 shells into the shotgun from under her bed, blessed herself in Navajo, and went outside to shoot it, yelling in Navajo about how the thing wasn't welcomed there, and to get the hell out of there, for it to linger somewhere else. Them both being traditional, the next day, they called a medicine man to come over and put cedar in. He prayed over everyone with cedar smoke and an eagle feather, blessed the place, made us eat bitter herbs called eagle's gull or something, and gave me an arrowhead. Apparently, I needed to carry one for protection, and a little pouch called corn pollen. Seems to work pretty well. The medicine man said that dog was a skinwalker, which in Navajo is a long word, but I call them Yoshis. The body of the stray dog, which was killed by the skinwalker, made an illusion so we wouldn't know it wasn't a real dog. He also said that Yoshis tend to harm people by using some sort of human bone straw to spit at someone. Think spitballs, only deadlier, and get human bones into them. Doctors can't detect it, but the medicine man that day pulled a piece of human skull out of Grandma's right shoulder, pretty big, about 2 inches long and 1 centimeter thick. It was real because we watched him pull it out of her. That was intense. That brings us to the end of this episode of the Witching Hour Wagon. More bone-chilling and terrifying stories are on their way soon. And as always, you can send your own scary story to the email below. So subscribe and press that like button. Thanks for tuning in. Be wary and take care, because something wicked is always on its way.